This work will not take hours. This work will not take days. This work will not just take weeks. We have a very long road ahead of us.
A long road ahead indeed, not just for the city of Baltimore, but for families grieving after Tuesday's horrific bridge collapse. I'm Gadi Schwartz. This is Stay Tuned Now. As we come on the air tonight, new details just in from Maryland's Governor Wes Moore on the Baltimore bridge collapse, including $60 million in federal emergency relief funds already sent in by the Biden administration. Here's what else we know right now. Tonight, as the NTSB is assessing the damage from inside the ship, divers have been working hard in some very murky conditions, combing through dangerous debris, all as part of the salvage phase of the operation begins. And so far, only 2 of the 6 victims have been recovered. Alejandro Hernandez Fuentes and Dorlean Castillo Cabrera, officials say they were found in a red pickup truck 25 feet under the water. And NBC News spoke to the wife of one of the men who survived the bridge collapse. That's surviving a fall of more than 10 stories in a vehicle. And she says, quote, all of the men were on a break in their cars when the boat hit. And it's a miracle her husband is alive because he didn't know how to swim. Today, stunning new video from on board the crashed cargo ship. Transportation officials there investigating what might have caused the crash. About 5 minutes before it happened, we know the power went out, disrupting the black box recording on board for about 2 minutes. In that time, black smoke started billowing out of the ship, where inside 2 pilots and 21 crew members were hearing emergency alarms going off. The ship's pilot apparently called for tugboats, the portside anchor to be dropped, and then that rare Mayday call, which ultimately saved lives. And NBC News correspondent Ryan Nobles is in Baltimore with more. Ryan, where do things stand right now in search of the remaining victims?
Well, it's a very difficult process, Gadi. The water is freezing cold. The divers have not really been able to even get in the water to do a human search of the remains of the victims. And so they've been forced to use sonar equipment, which has been helpful. That's one of the reasons they were able to locate 2 of the victims. But the debris field is massive. It's also very dangerous. When the divers were able to go into the water, they were basically just reaching out with their hands and feeling in the water, hoping to find something. The next stage of this is going to be when they actually start to remove the debris from the water. They're hopeful that over the course of that salvage process, that will allow them to recover the bodies of those victims. But the governor, the other officials involved in this said today they are not going to stop looking until they find those who lost their lives.
And just taking a look at that damage as close as we can today, I mean, it's still very clear that there is a way to go before even rebuilding the bridge can start again. Realistically, what's the timeline looking like out there?
They're really not willing to put a number on how long it's going to take, Gadi. This is, in many ways, an unprecedented situation. A harbor as busy as this, a bridge as big as this, a ship as big as this. All 3 of those things colliding at the same time. And each step of trying to get to the recovery phase is a new experience. The governor today likened it to that tanker, the container ship that was stuck in the Suez Canal that took 5 weeks for crews to remove. This particular ship is the same size as the Eiffel Tower. So that's going to mean it's going to take a huge engineering feat to get it out of there, on top of the fact that it has thousands of pounds of steel from the bridge itself on top of it. They've already said that they have acquired the largest crane on the eastern seaboard to come here and begin that process. But if you're just trying to put a number on it, Gadi, it's going to take months, not weeks, not even days, before they're really making progress on this recovery.
And Ryan, there was a pretty emotional afternoon, including that moment at the opening day at the Orioles game today, the crowd stopping and having this moment of silence. Let's take a quick listen if we can.
Before we sing our national anthem, written by Baltimorean Francis Scott Key, let us join together in a moment of silence for those who lost their lives in the tragedy at the Francis Scott Key Bridge early Tuesday morning.
Ryan Nobles, I mean, what's the community reaction there?
You know, there was so much energy and excitement at the ballpark today. This is opening day of the Major League Baseball season. The Orioles are beloved by this community. They've got a great team who won a huge game today. But the moment that they asked for that moment of silence, you could hear a pin drop. It was so quiet and somber. And I talked to a lot of fans here today that recognize that this tragedy is going to impact everyone, and it's going to take everyone to be a part of the recovery process. Take a listen. How big of an impact do you think it's going to be to not have the bridge there anymore? How will it impact you on a day-to-day basis?
I think it's going to be huge.
It's going to be huge.
Yeah.
I mean, just for the people just to get to work in that area. I mean,
as far as the economy for Baltimore, it's going to be devastating.
So you're talking, obviously, first and foremost about the loss of life. That is also tragic. But then second, you're talking about the economy, the number of jobs that are directly connected to this harbor. Then, of course, the moving of commerce in and out of this port, the 11th biggest port in the country, the #1 port in terms of the import and export of automobiles. And then something as simple, Gadi, as the daily commute. Our affiliate here in Baltimore warning their viewers the day after the bridge went down that commutes that normally take 10 to 15 minutes could take more than an hour. These Baltimoreans today told me that they are going to adapt, but it is not going to be easy, and it's going to take a long time for things to get back to normal.
Yeah, it used to be 30,000 cars a day over that bridge. Ryan Nobles, thanks so much for joining us. And Baltimore's bridge collapse is a disaster, not just for the city of Baltimore, but for the country's entire supply chain. Meanwhile, Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg has been meeting with supply chain experts to try to figure out what's going to happen with all the diverted trade routes. And then there's the insured losses from the disaster, which some analysts are now putting as the largest ever for a marine insurance payout. Take a listen.
I don't at this point anticipate that it's outside our realistic disaster scenario planning. It feels like a very substantial loss, potentially the largest ever marine insured loss.
So what does that mean? CNBC's global supply chain reporter Lorianne LaRocco joins us now. Lori, things are getting very complicated very quickly. What's the path forward looking like here? And also, what can you tell us about this news that we're seeing about this major ocean carrier kind of dumping the cargo responsibility elsewhere?
Yes, this is exclusive news that we broke just maybe like an hour ago. So MSC, which is the largest ocean carrier in the world, they have joined the ranks of other ocean carriers declaring where because this is almost like it's an act of God, if you will, right? It's an act of our foreseen nature. It's called force majeure, which literally means like out of forces. And so what they're doing is that you've got MSC, CMA, CGM, Evergreen, they're taking the containers, right, from the diverted vessels to the diverted port. But after that, the onus is now on the shippers to either find a truck to pick up, the container and take it out or get it on the rail. And the problem with this is that it really impacts the smaller shippers that do this on their own. And so a lot of times when you are bringing in your own product, you go to a port that you know and you work with all the time. So you might actually have shippers going into ports that they have never used. And so they're starting literally right at the ground level to get their container out. But the problem is once the container hits the ground, they only have so much free time before they get charged. And so it's like a race against time for some of these shippers that may not have like the DHLs of the world, the ITS logistics of the world, shepherding their container out of ports. And so this is just another hurdle for these shippers that are already like scurrying to figure out where is my cargo right now and how can I get it to its final destination.
And Lori, this is the closest East Coast port to the Midwest, which means it's one of the closest ports to that massive swath of the nation's farming industry. As we move into spring, is that going to cause a lot of problems?
Thankfully, Gadi, no, and here's why. So the Mississippi River is the main conduit for most of the grains because it goes down on barges and then it goes down to the port of New Orleans where it gets loaded onto a vessel and then it gets shipped off. Soybeans are one of the top exports out of Baltimore. And so what you're going to see is you're going to see diversions, most likely probably out of the port of Virginia, which is Norfolk. They have a great rail line that that they bring out their livestock products and their grain products from there. So the good news is that there is time now for agriculture to get their plans in place. Remember, folks, trade is nimble and it's agile. It has to move. And so unlike the Suez, where it was just like one way in, one way out, and you had a clog in the middle, which was the Ever Given, here you have a multitude of ports that can be used as a possible way out.
Always good to keep in perspective there. Lorianne LaRocco, thank you so much for joining us. And 25 years in prison. That is the sentence handed down today for Sam Bankman-Fried, the mastermind of that multi-billion-dollar crypto fraud scheme, convicted of stealing all that money from his customers. And on top of that, Bankman-Fried will have to forfeit about $11 billion in assets. NBC News correspondent Brian Chung has more.
Yeah, well, it appears that the saga for Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX has come to an ending for now, and it came in the form of a ruling from a judge in Lower Manhattan for a 25-year sentence related to the $10 billion of estimated customer deposits that were lost when the cryptocurrency exchange FTX spectacularly blew up in 2022. We have to remember that about 4 months ago, Sam Bankman-Fried was found guilty of 7 charges, including fraud and conspiracy. The judge deciding today that that was worth 25 years. Now, that seems to be in the middle of what the prosecutors and what Sam Bankman-Fried's defense were arguing for. So on the prosecution side, they had been looking for 40 to 50 years. They were pointing to the many victims of the blow-up of FTX and citing the thousands, in some cases millions of dollars that they lost as a result of Sam Bankman-Fried's misappropriation of those funds, using them to make risky bets that ultimately cost them the business, and all the while Sam Bankman-Fried living a pretty lavish lifestyle in the Caribbean. Whereas Sam Bankman-Fried's defense was arguing that he should have gotten a maximum of 6.5 years, and they were pointing to character-related reasons. They said that he was a person who suffered from depression. He also had anhedonia, which is a description of the inability to feel joy. They were saying that, yes, there were certainly photos of him hobnobbing with celebrities like Tom Brady, but that he didn't actually enjoy those interactions. He wasn't trying to steal money just for having some fun with celebrities. But ultimately, a judge did not find that convincing, again, sentencing him to 25 years. Where do we go from here? The Federal Bureau of Prisons will decide exactly where he will serve his term. But of course, the other question for customers is, will they get their money back? Those proceedings happening separately in a court out of Delaware. The question is whether or not they can find the $10 billion to make customers whole. Court down there getting the filing from FTX showing that they feel confident that they can make those that have legitimate claims full. But of course, we'll have to see how all of that develops. Gadi?
Quite a bit of scratch there, Brian Chung. Thanks so much. Now to New York City and possibly one of the biggest nights of fundraising for Democrats in the 2024 election. Right now, 3 of the 4 living U.S. presidents are together trying to beef up Biden's campaign war chest. An evening with Joe Biden, Barack Obama, and Bill Clinton at Radio City Music Hall sets up an interesting split screen with the presumptive Republican nominee, former President Donald Trump, who is also in New York today attending the wake for an NYPD officer who was recently shot and killed on the job. For Democrats, tonight's presidential trifecta has already raised $25 million, a record according to the Biden camp. And like we said, this is not your normal political fundraiser. In addition to 3 living U.S. presidents, there were also scheduled musical performances by people like Queen Latifah and Lizzo. Now, the cost to just get in the door, $250. But to get the smaller, more intimate areas of the fundraiser, that can run as much as $500,000, with a chance to take a picture with all 3 Democratic presidents, starting at $100,000. To be fair, the Trump campaign also charges about the same for that kind of access to their candidate. At a MAGA fundraiser last month in Palm Beach, invites like this one advertised pictures and a private dinner with the former president at a cost of $250,000 per couple. Let's bring in NBC's Gabe Gutierrez from 30 Rock across the street from where that mega fundraiser is still happening. Gabe, I know that your trip into the office today was probably very eventful. Where do things stand right now as far as overall campaign war chest? And what have we heard about how that whole three-president event next door is going.
Hi there, Gadi. Well, the actual event hasn't quite started yet. They have played a pre-taped segment, but the actual event with, any musical performances or that live conversation with the three presidents moderated by Stephen Colbert, that has not started yet. You're looking down there, and, I was just outside a short time ago, very heavy security. But you talked about fundraising, Gadi, and look, Democrats in recent weeks have far outpaced Republicans when it comes to fundraising. And if you look at the Trump campaign versus the Biden campaign, look, the Biden campaign you see that graphic there, how much they've cumulatively raised in the election cycle to date. You see that bar graph with the Biden campaign well ahead. And if you look at the actual war chest, if you combine the Democratic National Committee with the Biden campaign, we're talking about, $155 million or so cash on hand heading into March. The Trump campaign, as well as some super PACs, is down around $37 million. So certainly a huge fundraising advantage at this point for the Democrats. The question is, will it turn into votes come November, Gadi?
A very big question indeed. We know that President Biden is older than Barack Obama, but at 81, he's also older than Bill Clinton, and it looks like the way that he's been battling against these questions over his age, they're kind of old as time itself. We actually checked the archives and take a look at a much younger candidate. In fact, two much younger candidates using a lot of the same language way back in the day. Let's take a look at this.
All the controversy regarding your age, how do you feel you can respond to the young voices of America today and tomorrow?
Well, I think age is wisdom comes from age, experience, and intelligence.
I don't think Senator Diller is too old to be president. It's the age of his ideas that I question.
It's about how old your ideas are.
That sounds very familiar to a spry-looking Bob Dole there. What's the latest age messaging coming from the Biden camp? Any changes?
Look, Gadi, the question of age has come up many a time in political campaigns. On this one, though, it is a little different. Both candidates, obviously very advanced in age. The Biden campaign, though, they don't like focusing on age, and they, get frankly annoyed when, either reporters, the media, what they see is too much of a focus on age, and they claim that they, really want to focus on the issue here. But, you speak, you look at polls, public polling, you also go out on the campaign trail, you do speak with some voters. It is a legitimate concern for many of these voters, but the Biden campaign says, look, we're past the State of the Union address now. We've just gone to these battleground states, 8 of them over the last couple of weeks, and we're heading into the heart of this campaign. And they feel that once people start paying attention really to this campaign and look at the contrast between President Biden and former President Trump, they say that the age question will it's just noise at this point, Gadi.
Gabe Gutierrez, thanks so much. And while 3 of the 5 living Democratic presidents, or 3 of the 4 living Democratic presidents are campaigning, former President Donald Trump decided to spend his day in New York today, out on Long Island at the wake of an NYPD officer killed in the line of duty. Officer Jonathan Diller was shot after approaching an illegally parked car during a routine traffic stop on Monday. He leaves behind a wife and a 1-year-old child. And Trump saying, quote, law and order are a major focus of his campaign.
And this is what happened is such a sad event, such a horrible thing, and it's happening all too often, and we're just not going to let it happen. The Diller family you'll never be the same. You can never be the same, and we have to stop it. We have to stop it. We have to get back to law and order. We have to do a lot of things differently.
For more, let's bring in NBC News correspondent Raheem Ellis.
Despite a steady downpour of drenching rain today, mourners have come out to pay their respects to the 31-year-old officer Jonathan Diller, who was killed earlier this week. Among those in attendance was former President Donald Trump. He spent about 30 minutes inside this funeral home with the family of the fallen officer. When he came out and made some remarks, he was more subdued in terms of his tone about crime, which seemed to meet the moment. The former president, however, did not mention any specifics as to what he might do to reduce crime. While he says it is raging in some places, the truth of the matter here in New York City, according to the NYPD, Major crime in the city is down 2.3% from this time last year. And nationwide, the FBI also reports a reduction in the crime numbers. And speaking of crime, which is what brought us here, 2 suspects in connection with the death of Officer Diller have been arrested, arraigned, and the police are saying there is no possibility for them to be out at any point on bail. Meanwhile, this officer's funeral is set for Saturday. Gadi?
Raheem Ellis, thanks so much. And don't go anywhere. We are just getting started. Up next, a new twist in the allegations against Sean Diddy Combs. Police arresting the man they say smuggled in guns and drugs for the music mogul. Plus, a 9-year-old takes police on a car chase in California. This is one pursuit you gotta see to believe. And later this hour, in the future of everything, we are looking at AI and music and how the industry is trying to prevent the tech from causing major problems down the road. That's all just ahead, so stay tuned. Hey, welcome back. We've got the latest on a deadly stabbing spree in Illinois. More on that in just a minute. But first, here are some of the other headlines we're watching tonight. The judge in former President Trump's election interference case in Georgia heard arguments today from the Trump team. They're trying to dismiss the charge by arguing that Trump's comments about the 2020 election are protected by the First Amendment, but the judge has not made any decisions yet. And we were expecting a ruling today from the Florida Supreme Court on abortion rights, but it looks like that's not going to come down until Monday. The court is deciding whether to add a ballot initiative that will let voters decide if they want to protect abortion access until viability, which is about 24 weeks of pregnancy. And there's a new big change coming to the U.S. Census. Hispanic or Latino is now going to be listed as a single race/ethnicity category. And now people of Middle Eastern or North African descent will be able to check that off. The change is all part of race and ethnicity standards from the Biden administration. And in Massachusetts, a robot police dog was shot a bunch of times and is being credited with potentially saving some lives. That robo-canine is named Roscoe and was remotely operated by police. They sent Roscoe into a home with a person barricaded inside and allowed cops to survey the situation before they went in and arrested the suspect, who was armed with a rifle. And no one has won the Powerball jackpot, so now the pot stands at $935 million. That is a cash value of more than $449 million if you take it. So the next drawing is on Saturday, and the chances of winning are still like 1 in 292 million. And 4 people were killed and even more wounded in a stabbing spree in Rockford, Illinois. Prosecutors say the suspect blamed drug use for that sudden attack. And among the victims is a 15-year-old girl who died protecting her friends. NBC correspondent Maggie Vespa has more.
Tonight, as Rockford struggles to understand the carnage, the accused hacker in Wednesday's deadly stabbing spree, 22-year-old Christian Soto, in court facing 13 charges, from first-degree murder to home invasion, for police say a rampage spanning 5 crime scenes across this northern Illinois community. They say Soto attacked 11 people total, killing 4, including a mother and son, a mailman on his route, and a 15-year-old girl, Jenna Newcomb.
Jenna died saving her sister and her friend.
Prosecutors today saying the spree started when Soto visited a friend in the first house who he said gave him laced marijuana.
Soto said he became paranoid after the drug usage. He said he retrieved a knife from the kitchen and proceeded to stab Jacob and Ramona to death.
From there, they say he targeted at random, driving his truck onto lawns, breaking into one home where 3 teenage girls were watching a movie, grabbing a bat.
He started swinging the bat, striking all the female victims.
Darlene Weber says Soto came in their back door, attacking her and her children.
He looked at me. He just had the world's biggest smile on his face.
He was smiling.
He looked like the devil incarnate.
They say the family dog, Brandy, bit Soto on the leg as Weber's son fought him off.
And I grabbed a syrup bottle and started beating him with it. I'm not even kidding. If it wasn't for him, I don't think that I'd be standing here talking to you right now. I really don't. It was frightening.
Tonight, a woman who identified herself as Soto's mother telling NBC News he's a loving person and he has never hurt anybody before. We never felt threatened by him. We can't believe that is my son. Maggie Vespa, NBC News, Rockford, Illinois.
Maggie, thank you. We've got some new body cam footage tonight showing the moment Sean Diddy Combs allegedly had a drug dealer or drug mule was arrested in Miami. Police say 25-year-old Brendan Paul was taken into custody at a Miami airport. Paul was named in the lawsuit from music producer Rodney Jones, who accused Paul of smuggling drugs and guns to Diddy. And joining us now is NBC News correspondent Steve Patterson. Steve, specifically, what does the lawsuit say Paul did, and what's his relationship with Diddy?
I just want to recalibrate here if we can, Gadi. If the feds have anything in relation to the magnitude of the raids that we saw at Diddy's estates, we don't know it yet. As far as we know, these warrants are still sealed in an investigation being handled by a Department of Homeland Security out of the Southern District of New York. We don't know what they have. Tangentially, this guy, Brendan Paul, was arrested as the raids were happening in Miami, as you mentioned. They got him on two things. One, cocaine. Two, weed gummies. That's it. Not to minimize anything that is being alleged. And what we do have is what's only being alleged. It comes from these awful civil suits that allege a whole host of awful things about Diddy and people around Diddy and in his inner circle. And one of them is that from this music producer that you mentioned, that Paul is alleged to be this drug mule in what is described as this RICO enterprise, that he was ferrying drugs and guns possibly across state lines, potentially overseas. But as far as a link between the civil suits and the ongoing sweeping criminal investigation that's going on right now, that link has not been made yet. Beyond that, all we know about Paul is that he knew Diddy. He was a former Syracuse basketball player turned music producer, so ostensibly that's how he came to know Diddy and came to kind of be in his inner circle. Beyond that, we don't know much of anything.
It's pretty remarkable. We were just playing video of those raids, and I counted, I don't know, like dozens and dozens of FBI and all kinds of different, I mean, you've got, looks like an elite squad going in, you've got armed officers, you've got scores of agents there at the property, and this guy is the only person that's been arrested so far.
Only guy.
And it's coke and gummies?
And
I mean, how come?
And not at any of these estates. Again, it's all tangential what we know about this right now. You know, Diddy's sons were detained briefly at his L.A. estate. It probably is part of the process of serving the warrant. We just don't know, again, what's in the warrants. It seems like they're looking for very specific information, probably on a hard drive, maybe some images related to his sex trafficking investigation. So we don't even know if they're going after anybody yet. And as far as we know, Diddy's still in the country. Diddy's still free to be in the country. Diddy still has his passport. Diddy is still free to have his passport. No information about where this investigation is going, only that it's huge and it's happening.
And that we have to wait and see.
Wait and see.
Steve Patterson, thanks so much.
Thanks.
And coming up, a man gets a second chance at life because, get this, of a story he watched on NBC News Now. We're going to tell you what led to a breakthrough surgery. But first, you got to see this. This is a car accident in Daytona Beach, Florida, that led to some amazing teamwork by a group of good Samaritans. You see the crash right there that led to one of those cars flipping over on its side, trapping the driver. Now, the strangers nearby, they could have just waited for rescue crews to get to the scene, but they decided to take matters into their own hands. Look at this, 1, 2, 3. I think at the end, there's something like 9 people who left their cars to turn that SUV back over, and they did it. They got it done. Police say no one was hurt in the crash, and there is more proof of hope for humanity. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back. Our friend Von Hilliard is here in Los Angeles to talk all things RFK Jr. and his run for the White House. But first, here's some of the other stories happening out west that we're following right now. Police in Oroville, California, chased down a car after it rammed into a patrol vehicle, but the driver behind the wheel was, get this, a 9-year-old boy driving his mom's car. Luckily, no one was hurt, but officers at the scene say they were shocked to see the kid and more shocked when he told police he was sorry and just trying to get to school. And people living in Carnation, Washington are fed up after a false alarm from a nearby dam's emergency system keeps going off. Apparently, it is the 8th time in 4 years that the false alarms have sounded, and each time, those who live nearby are forced to evacuate. Now, if the dam were to actually break, the town would see devastating damage, and an investigation into the false alarms is underway. And a new statue featuring Martin Luther King Jr. and former Los Angeles County Supervisor Kenneth Hahn has been unveiled in Los Angeles. There it is right there. This is located just outside of a Compton church. And that statue pays tribute to the historic moment when Hahn welcomed the civil rights icon to L.A. way back in 1961. Hahn was the only white politician who was willing to meet with Dr. King at the time. And out here in California, one presidential hopeful is turning a lot of heads. It is this guy, third-party independent candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He picked his running mate yesterday, Nicole Shanahan, someone who has never held elected office just like him, but has put a lot of money and support behind his super PAC and his campaign. And Kennedy is ruffling all kinds of feathers, both on the Trump side and on the Democratic side. Former President Trump putting this post out today, calling him a radical left Democrat, but then saying that he loves that he is running because he will take votes away from President Biden. Meanwhile, yesterday at the Kennedy event over in Oakland, this DNC truck was seen posted up outside saying that RFK Jr. has the same biggest donor as Donald Trump. So let's bring in NBC's very own Vaughn Hillier to talk about whether we can actually see another Kennedy in the White House. Vaughn, Kennedy is saying he's a spoiler for both the Biden campaign and the Trump campaign. I got to ask, who's he pulling from the most these days?
Right. This is the kind of the bizarre nature of his appeal, is that there are folks who would otherwise tell me they would vote for Donald Trump this November. And then there's folks who said that otherwise they would vote for Joe Biden, because this is a man, right? We're talking about the nephew of former President John F. Kennedy, the son of Bobby Kennedy, who was assassinated while running for president himself in 1968. And if you go and listen to one of the current Robert F. Kennedy Jr. speeches, it sounds like a lot of issues. It's really anti-corporate, it's clean air and clean water and the health of kids. But then when you start going into the realm of vaccines, he is an anti-vaxxer, right? He'll tell you that he doesn't think that there is a safe vaccine that is currently out on the market. And that is where a great amount of the appeal comes, particularly among those that, otherwise would vote for Donald Trump. But there's also a great segment of the Democratic Party who also have concerns about some of the, as they say, big pharma and the impact on society today and their control over things like vaccines. And that is where Kennedy is really making a play on this.
You've been talking to so many people. You travel the country more than anybody else I know. And you're talking to people that are looking to vote in November. I do want to ask, everyone's talking about him as a spoiler. Is there a chance that he could make it all the way?
Absolutely. I mean, he could. Let's be very real. He could pull off a victory in a couple states as an independent. He is a known name. The Kennedy name is a known name. And look, NBC News polling has showed already that 70% of Americans didn't want a Donald Trump-Joe Biden rematch, and that's what they got. But even if he doesn't win a state, he could still have a significant impact. If he wins anywhere from 5%, 15%, 20%, if he pulls a greater share of votes away from Joe Biden or a greater share from Donald Trump, it'd be hard not to look at that if he, disrupts the outcome of the election. And if you're one of those camps that loses, saying, did Kennedy cost us this? And that is where you see consternation from both the Biden campaign and the Trump campaign that are attacking him on very different things. The Trump campaign calling him a far leftist, right? And then the Biden campaign calling him a plant to help Donald Trump. And so really nobody likes Robert F. Kennedy Jr. right now except his supporters.
Let me ask you this. So much of this is dependent on the good old getting on the ballot. You got to have your name on the ballot. Kennedy is a Kennedy. That name is very recognizable to anybody that knows about American politics. Is there a chance that, even in the states that he's not on the ballot, a big, strong write-in campaign might tip the scales?
Right. All of this is going on in real time. And I've met volunteers in New Hampshire, in Nevada, in Arizona that are on the ground, became familiar with Kennedy's independent run through social media, through podcasts. People like Tucker Carlson have also promoted him. Joe Rogan has promoted Kennedy as a viable figure. And what this has led to, folks around the country, volunteers getting signatures, petitions to get him on the ballots in these states. Now, you mentioned the name Nicole Shanahan, the VP pick. She is somebody who used to be married to one of the Google co-founders. And as part of the divorce, she got a big chunk of money, and she was actually behind a $4 million Super Bowl ad on Kennedy's behalf last year. That's what really caught the attention of Kennedy. And now the question is, how much money is she willing to put in this campaign to help go and get those signatures, help get on TV airwaves? Because right now, Kennedy, he needs the money, and Nicole Shanahan, frankly, has a heck of a lot of it. And she could really, if she does spend millions of her own money towards their bid, you folks around the country could start seeing a lot of TV ads, a lot of YouTube ads, a lot of digital ads targeting them from the Kennedy campaign. And that could make folks familiar that it's not just Trump or Biden on the ballot, but it's also a Kennedy on the ballot.
Yeah, she's got much more money than Aaron Rodgers, that's for sure.
That's accurate.
Fawn Hilliard, thanks so much for joining us. And we often report on life-saving innovations, and sometimes it can make all the difference for just one person. Well, NBC News Now anchor Kate Snow has a story about this groundbreaking new treatment for lung cancer that happened to save one doctor's life. Take a look.
As a pulmonologist based in California, Dr. Gary Gibbon has seen his share of lung disease, but he never expected to be diagnosed with cancer himself.
I developed a cough, I lost weight, and I went to get a chest x-ray and then a CT scan of my lungs. And I was like in a state of shock that I had, advanced stage lung cancer.
Gary's doctors at UCLA tried everything, immunotherapy, chemotherapy, radiation, but it wasn't working. He was in the ICU when his wife Nola got a call from Gary's doctor.
He started sadly and terribly, and I was like, I'd heard it, and that was just it. It was something like, there's nothing, we've exhausted all of our options.
But in that darkest hour, Gary remembered a story Nola had shown him.
Thankfully, we are cancer-free, right?
About a year ago, I reported on 2 lung cancer patients who'd had a groundbreaking double lung transplant at Northwestern Medicine in Chicago. Dr. Barat puts patients on full heart-lung bypass, keeping them alive while carefully removing both lungs at once. He then washes the airways to remove any remaining cancer cells before 2 new lungs are transplanted in.
You made our year when we saw that story.
How much difference do you think it made that you happened to see that piece?
It was 100% everything.
What would have happened if you hadn't seen it?
He would be dead. I'm not joking.
Gary asked his LA doctors to contact Northwestern. He was airlifted to Chicago. Gary's cancer treatments had damaged his lungs and liver. Gary would need not just a double lung transplant, but a liver transplant too.
We had the technology to do it. We had the know-how to do it. We had the skill set to do it. This patient needed it, and we were the only place in the world that could do it.
Dr. Satish Nadig, chief of transplant surgery at Northwestern Medicine, focused on the liver, working side by side with Dr. Ankit Barat, director of the Northwestern Medicine Canning Thoracic Center, who pioneered the double lung transplant for cancer patients.
Dr. Barat, were you confident going in that this would work? You'd never done it before.
There's always a little bit of risk when you perform something for the first time. So we felt like there was a pretty high probability that would work. But certainly we recognized that there were certain risks involved.
Risks like keeping the donated liver alive for 17 hours in a box while Dr. Barat replaced Gary's lungs.
We used a machine where we put the liver on the machine and it's pumped through with normal temperature blood. And it's actually working in this box. And this liver is just functioning on the side of the room.
The surgery was a success.
He was sleeping after surgery, and I could see his chest going up and down. And I was like, oh my God, I haven't seen that in months. I hadn't seen him breathing.
6 months post-surgery, Gary is now cancer-free.
One of the choices I made right up front with Nola was that I said that I am going to spread the word about this. As soon as I came out of surgery and I was able to talk properly, I'm like, I'm gonna talk about this wherever I can. And
because you want to help the next person find it.
Yes.
Right.
Inspiration right there. Kate Snow, thanks so much. And now to Colorado, where a lot of those who live in places like Steamboat Springs with plenty of good jobs are still feeling locked out of the American dream. But there's been a recent vote there that could be a key to unlocking more doors to affordability. And NBC's Shannon Pettypiece explores a potential game changer for that mountain town. Take a look.
I know we're a little overbooked today.
Sinai Sturm, a cancer nurse in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, has spent more than 3 years in housing limbo.
How many offers have you put in total?
About a dozen.
And how many of those have you gotten?
None.
As remote workers and second home buyers flocked to resort communities since the start of the pandemic, realtors here say home prices have nearly doubled, averaging $1.8 million for a typical 3-bedroom house.
You can't afford a house here.
Yeah, we have 2 great incomes, good jobs, very happy in our careers. I think we're well compensated, but you just can't.
City officials say they are at a housing breaking point where everyone from hourly workers to high-paid professionals are struggling to afford a place to live. Finding a solution, though, is dividing residents of this small town.
We are building a slum. It sounds great, but we're putting all the poor people on one side of town.
If we want a diverse, functional city where the people who work here can live here, we need to take action on affordable housing now.
Emotions ran high at a city council meeting debating a proposal to build more than 2,000 apartments and single-family homes on a ranch bought by the city's housing authority. The homes would be prioritized for local workers with restrictions on rent and sale prices.
Who do you envision living there?
Essentially every spectrum of our workforce.
Jason Peasley heads the local housing authority. He says there's a lot more on the line than just affordability.
I think we'll continue to see a hollowing out of our middle class, and the housing problem will continue to exacerbate the employment problems that we have, where businesses are restraining their growth, unable to attract and retain employees, and we'll see our economy stall out.
But longtime residents like Jim Engelken say the proposed solution would create problems of its own.
It's an overreach. It is way beyond the scale of what this town at 13,000 people can absorb. We've got one road into town, one road out of town.
You feel like it's just too big?
It's just too big.
The majority of voters in Steamboat Springs appear to agree. This week, early results showing them voting down the project, leaving those caught in the middle still searching for a place to call home. Shannon Pettypiece, NBC News, Steamboat Springs, Colorado.
Shannon, thank you. And still ahead, NBC's Ellison Barber has the latest from the ground in Haiti, where the situation is looking bleak as it is getting harder for food and supplies to get into that country. That story and more headlines from around the world are on the other side of this break, so stay tuned. Hey, welcome back. The UN is now calling the situation in Haiti, quote, cataclysmic, with more than 1,500 people killed by gang violence. That story is coming up in just a moment. But first, let's take a quick look around the world. Spanish prosecutors want at least 2-year prison sentences for Luis Rubiales, the former Spanish soccer chief who kissed a female soccer player against her will at Spain's World Cup win last year. Now, he's been charged with 1 count of sexual assault and 1 count of coercion for his alleged actions after the kiss. Rubiales was forced to resign as the head of the Spanish Soccer Federation, and despite being indicted, he continues to deny doing anything wrong. North Korea TV has censured a British gardening show by blurring the host's pants. Now, the episode aired on the Korean Central Television earlier this week. That's the image right there. North Korea has not given a reason for the censoring, but back in the early 90s, the country outlawed blue jeans because they were viewed as a symbol of U.S. or Western imperialism. So, who knows? Today, a bus crash in South Africa has killed 45 people, and the only survivor is an 8-year-old girl. Now, the bus was traveling near Botswana, near the border there, when the driver lost control. The bus fell some 160 feet off a bridge into a ravine where it burst into flames. And Pope Francis led the Holy Thursday Mass at St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican today. He's 87 years old and has recently been dealing with respiratory issues. But those who attended say he looks strong and healthy, which is hopeful because he's got a busy Easter weekend ahead of him. And the humanitarian crisis in Haiti grows more dire every single day, with hundreds of schools forced to close because of gang violence, and parents are struggling to keep their kids safe. Roads, ports, and highways are now controlled by gangs, meaning Haitians can't get food, water, or medication. NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber has the latest.
The violence in Port-au-Prince is relentless. So far this month, more than 33,000 people have been forced to flee the capital city.
Fierce violence continues to grip Port-au-Prince. Criminal gangs are intensifying their rampage, targeting citizens and critical infrastructure, causing chaos across the country. Once a sanctuary for children, this school intentionally set on fire by armed gangs, according to UNICEF. The United States is evacuating their citizens almost daily. But with the country's biggest international airport closed, most Haitians are unable to leave. Americans Missy and John Tennant are working tirelessly to try and get their adopted teenage Haitian sons home.
Begging, screaming at the top of our lungs, just saying, please help us get our children out of this deadly situation.
More than 480 human rights organizations are asking the Biden administration for a new designation of temporary protected status for Haitians in the United States and a pause on deportations. But 3 U.S. officials tell NBC News the Biden administration is not planning to change course. At Mission Life International's birthing center, we met mothers trying to care for newborns with their country on the brink of famine. Sarael is just 3 months old. She's Jean Erlande Cadet's 4th child.
No. Have you had any moments where you've worried that you might not be able to keep your kids safe?
Every day, she tells me, every day we pray God will keep us safe.
Earlier this week, the Biden administration approved a proposal to provide Haiti's national police with weapons, ammunition, bulletproof vests, and helmets, all of it coming from a stockpile that belongs to the Department of Homeland Security. It's worth about $10 million, and according to the Biden administration, the goal of providing this is to try and help Haiti's national police restore order in the city of Port-au-Prince. Back to you.
NBC's Allison Barber, thanks so much. Meanwhile, the Biden administration is getting a lot of heat for its response to Haitian migrants here in the United States. Almost 500 human rights organizations are urging the Biden administration to stop deportations to Haiti, but 3 U.S. officials tell NBC News there are no plans to do so. Let's bring in NBC News Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley for more. Julia, what is the current policy when it comes to deporting people to a war-torn country?
Well, I've been following these flights every day, and so far there have not been deportation flights back to Haiti since gangs took over the airport earlier this month. But I will say they are continuing the policy of interdicting at sea. Just a few weeks ago, we saw 65 Haitians take to sea by a sailboat. That's probably because they don't have enough fuel to be able to get out of the ports on a more powerful boat, and they were interdicted by the Coast Guard and returned back to Haiti. And even without flights leaving, I'm told that's just because there's really not a safe place for those flights to land with the U.S. personnel from ICE who would be operating those flights. It's not a matter of the U.S. formally suspending Haitian deportation flights. And a lot of this comes down to the fact that they don't want to trigger more migration. But a lot of the advocates we're talking to say, look, it's virtually impossible to leave anyways. Let's at least welcome those who are able to escape and give them a safe place to stay in the United States.
So just to clarify there, it sounds like from your reporting that the main concern isn't necessarily these planes landing and then letting people off. It's to protect the U.S. pilots that would be dropping them off. That's why those may have been paused, and those that are going out to sea, they're still getting pushed back into Haiti. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, really, there's just no place for those flights to land, at least within Port-au-Prince right now, since the gangs took over that airport. I mean, the only Americans who are getting out sometimes are airlifted over to the Dominican Republic and then flown out of there. So trying to get ICE flights back right now, I'm told, is an operational challenge. It's not a change in policy because of the conditions in Haiti. So, yes, that's an important point to clarify. And anyone they see at sea, they're still interdicting. They say that's in large part because that journey is so dangerous, they don't want to encourage more migrants to take to the sea. They're pointing to things like that $10 million in equipment, that proposal that was approved, pointing to that. They're also looking at aid from the State Department as part of a policy that says, look, we want to improve Haiti, not allow people to leave Haiti and come to the United States because they don't want to trigger more migration. But as things get more and more desperate, I think the Biden administration is going to get more heat, as we saw this week from that letter from 481 human rights organizations.
NBC's Julia Ainsley, thank you so very much. And before we go, it is time for the future of everything. And we've talked about the problems AI is causing for the music industry, especially where deep fakes and copyrights are concerned. Well, now the business is starting to take steps to stay ahead of the AI revolution, even embracing it. That's all straight ahead. Stay tuned. And time now for the future of everything. T-Pain, John Legend, and Demi Lovato are dropping some new music. Kind of, because it's not really them singing these tracks. YouTube is testing out this Dream Track AI tool, and instead of fighting the tech, some artists are like, might as well get on board, I guess. CNBC's Julia Borston has a story.
This may sound like Demi Lovato, but it's not. It's an AI-generated song created by YouTube's Dream Track tool, part of Google's latest experiments in generative AI. The company is partnering with record labels, including Universal Music Group, to create guardrails to protect artists' voices from being exploited and to enable them to profit from custom AI-created music.
Like Julia, you are like the sun.
Dream Track, which is being tested as an integration into YouTube's TikTok rival, YouTube Shorts, allows creators to make AI-generated songs with the voices of famous artists. 9 big-name artists are participating and being paid for their participation by YouTube, from John Legend to Demi Lovato and T-Pain.
Drinking tequila, hanging with my friends.
Yeah, AI is crazy, bro.
I got 1,000 people watching me.
Bro, I ain't made a song like this in years.
We were the first TV journalists to demo the new tool alongside Melanie Wilking, a YouTube creator who's part of the initial test. And we asked Dream Track to create us a song about the stock market.
S&P, you're so sweet. You're gonna make me rich one day.
2 decades after music piracy threatened the music industry, it's facing another reckoning as music labels and artists decide whether to embrace the new tech or risk being left behind.
We have to figure out how to effectively partner to drive innovation, to be able to adapt to new technology. I think you'll see that we've worked to try to understand where the opportunity is and to get out in front of it.
YouTube wasn't the first to experiment with AI-generated music. Last year, the artist Grimes invited her fans to use Gen AI to create songs in her voice. If the songs are a hit, she says she'll split royalties with them. As to when YouTube's Dream Track tool will be widely available, the company's still working on it.
We know that there are challenges and a lot of work that we need to do to get to the place where we will be able to fully scale a product. In other words, it might take some time before you have the ability to make your own song.
In the meantime, 100 of YouTube's creators and their millions of fans are getting a window into what the future of custom AI music will look like.
What a wild, wild world. Julia Borson, thanks so much. That does it for us tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. We'll see you here tomorrow. But until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.